The Browns' offseason just took another big turn, and if you thought things were winding down, think again. The latest mock draft analysis reveals a potential bombshell. I'm going to break it down for you in detail, but first, be sure to hit that like button and follow along as I keep you updated daily. Cleveland may not be drafting a quarterback at number 2 after all. Instead, Abdul Carter, Penn State's dominant pass rusher, is emerging as the likely choice. That's right. With all the talk about Shedeur Sanders and the Browns' need for a franchise quarterback, Andrew Berry may be sticking to a simple philosophy: best player available. And if that's the case, the Browns could be entering the season with an elite defense but no clear long-term answer at quarterback. Let's break it down. The case for Carter is simple. He's a game-destroying pass rusher with the potential to transform a defense. The Browns have always been an analytics-driven front office and have historically leaned toward taking the best talent on the board rather than looking at positional need. Carter, who had 12 sacks and 66 pressures last season, fits that mold. Pairing him with Myles Garrett would give Cleveland one of the most fearsome pass-rushing duos in the NFL. But the problem? The Browns still don't have a clear answer at quarterback. That's where things get tricky. The latest reports from insiders like Matthew Berry suggest that Cleveland does, in fact, like Shedeur Sanders. The Browns also view Cam Ward as a viable option, but with him expected to go number 1 overall to the Titans, that leaves Sanders as the best QB available. If the Browns pass on Carter, what's their plan B? Do they take a quarterback later in the draft? Do they enter the season with Kenny Pickett and a veteran like Carson Wentz? And let's not forget, this front office plays things close to the vest. If the Browns were locked in on taking a quarterback, would we really be hearing about it this early? That's not how Andrew Berry operates. The fact that there's so much speculation about Shedeur Sanders might actually be a sign that the Browns are going in a different direction. But let's say Cleveland does pass on a quarterback. What's the rest of their draft plan? The latest mock draft projects Iowa running back Caleb Johnson as their second-round pick. With Nick Chubb's future still uncertain and Jerome Ford failing to lock down the RB1 role, adding a powerful, physical back like Johnson makes sense. He averaged 6.4 yards per carry despite playing behind a struggling offensive line, showing he can create yards on his own. Then comes the most controversial pick of the draft, quarterback Kyle McCord in the 3rd round. McCord, the former Ohio State QB, is a polarizing prospect. His arm talent is undeniable, but his decision-making and pocket presence have been questioned. However, the Browns are an analytically driven team, and McCord's measurable traits, velocity, accuracy, spin rate, are all metrics that Cleveland values. If they believe he has the raw tools to develop into an NFL starter, they could view him as a long-term project while a veteran handles the job in 2024. Beyond that, the Browns add tight end Terrence Ferguson out of Oregon, a versatile playmaker who could eventually replace David Njoku, and safety Andrew Mukuba from Texas, a player who could provide much-needed depth in the secondary following Rodney McLeod's retirement. But let's get back to the core issue. If the Browns take Carter over Sanders, what does that say about their confidence in this quarterback class? There's been a growing belief that 2024 is simply not a strong year for QBs. If Cleveland doesn't believe in Sanders, it might actually be smarter to wait, load up on talent, and find a quarterback in a future draft rather than forcing a pick out of desperation. Still, the decision isn't easy. Fans are already debating whether passing on a QB would be a massive mistake. If Carter becomes an All-Pro but the Browns still don't have a reliable quarterback, was it worth it? If Shedeur Sanders develops into a franchise QB elsewhere, will Cleveland regret it for years to come? Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski have to get this right. The Browns are in a division loaded with quarterback talent. Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, and even a Steelers team that just added Russell Wilson, there's no room for error. If the Browns don't solve their QB issue, they risk wasting the prime years of Myles Garrett and this elite defense. So, Browns fans, let's hear it. If Abdul Carter and Shedeur Sanders are both on the board, who are you taking? Do you trust the Browns front office to develop a quarterback later in the draft, or do they need to take their shot now? And if they do pass on a QB, what's the next move? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And here's where things get even more intense, because if the Browns truly pass on a quarterback at number 2, they better have a plan that keeps them competitive in a brutal AFC North. This isn't a division where you can afford to be weak at QB. Joe Burrow is locked in with the Bengals, Lamar Jackson just won MVP, and the Steelers, even after a shaky offensive season, went out and added Russell Wilson. Meanwhile, the Browns? Right now, they have Kenny Pickett as their QB1. That's not going to cut it. If Cleveland is going all in on defense, they need to answer one simple question. How do they plan to score points? Taking Abdul Carter makes sense from a roster-building standpoint. The Browns' defense would be terrifying, Garrett and Carter collapsing the pocket, Denzel Ward and Greg Newsome locking down receivers, and Jim Schwartz dialing up chaos. But what happens when this team finds itself in a shootout? What happens when they need a game-winning drive? Are they really putting their faith in Kenny Pickett or a mid-round rookie to go head-to-head with the best quarterbacks in the NFL? That's where the veteran QB conversation comes back into play. If the Browns draft Carter, they're essentially signaling that they're not fully sold on Shedeur Sanders, and they're going to find another way to address quarterback. Maybe that means signing Carson Wentz. Maybe it means waiting for a Kirk Cousins trade to materialize. Maybe it means gambling on Kyle McCord in the 3rd round and hoping he develops into something special. But none of those options are sure things, and that's what makes this situation so nerve-wracking. Meanwhile, let's talk about Caleb Johnson, the projected 2nd-round pick. If Cleveland does take Carter at number 2, adding a running back like Johnson suddenly becomes even more crucial. Without an elite quarterback, the Browns will need to rely heavily on the ground game. Kevin Stefanski knows how valuable a dominant rusher can be. Just look at how his offense functioned when Nick Chubb was healthy. But with Chubb's status uncertain and Jerome Ford proving inconsistent, Johnson could be the next workhorse back for this team. And this is where the draft strategy gets fascinating. If the Browns take Carter, Johnson, and McCord with their first 3 picks, they're essentially building a team designed to win with defense and a power running game. That's an old-school football formula, and while it can work, it only works if everything clicks perfectly. If the run game struggles or if the quarterback play is below average, suddenly you're looking at a team that just can't keep up on the scoreboard. So let's lay out the scenarios. If the Browns take Shedeur Sanders, they're betting that he's the future of the franchise. He'd need time to develop, but at least they'd have a clear plan at quarterback. The risk? If Sanders doesn't pan out, Cleveland will have passed on a generational pass rusher in Carter, and they'll still be stuck in QB purgatory. Is Shedeur Sanders the guy, or should Cleveland go all in on Abdul Carter and build a defensive powerhouse? Would you be comfortable rolling into the season with Kenny Pickett and a mid-round rookie at QB? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And click the like button and subscribe to the channel. Go Browns!